Welcome to Teis Talks, where we discuss all things faith and family. And if you have been joining us the last 2 weeks, you will know this is part two of hearing
my wife, Mrs. Anna Teis. You are going to love the conclusion of this message. If you didn't catch the first part, go back in the archives and listen to part one and then listen to part two together. It'll be a blessing to you.
Yeah, so stop listening to us right now and go back to the previous episode. You are going to want to hear what she has to say on the family. It was so good. This is part two as we listen in to her speaking at one of our own ladies' conferences here at Liberty Baptist Church when she was teaching our ladies here in the Las Vegas Valley. Thank you for joining us. Let's take a listen.
I want my kids to be strong-willed. I have strong-willed children. Strong-willed children make better kids. They're not easy. They're horribly hard. But it's the self-willed kid that I do not want. And I would spank my self-willed child. I love strong-willed children. But whenever they're self-willed, they're going to do what they want and it's wrong, then I am going to correct it by spanking it. And I will have another lesson sometime on how to spank. You never beat your child. You never slap your child. The only correction you do physically on your child should be where God put two little bottom cheeks and you sit on those cheeks. It should not be here. It should be down here, and it should be very cushiony where you're swatting those little cheeks. And I'll go on about that another time. Ask for their protection and blessing. And I even went to the point of, when they were little, I'd say, God, give them the ability to play the piano, give them the ability to sing. I asked God, he would give Matthew the ability to communicate God's word, and that Joshua would have the ability to communicate God's word, because they had told us when they were younger they wanted to be preachers. And I thought, oh, good, if they're going to be preachers. Of course, I prayed that God would let them be preachers, because I thought it was the neatest life in the world. But I prayed then, I've heard some preachers, they need to know how to preach. And I thought, God, just give my young men the ability to preach. So those are just things that I prayed for. One thing with your children, have them participate. And you don't have to be a preacher to have your kids participate. We have cleanup day. My kids actually did like cleanup day. At least they acted like they did. We planted the trees out there. Some of them might even know which trees they helped plant out there, the bushes and things like that, and the bathrooms they cleaned. Help them, have them help. It's fun to help in the house of the Lord. Get them involved. One of my neatest stories my husband told was, whenever I was watching one Saturday afternoon, Jonathan and Savannah, I put them in the cart, in the stroller, and I was going down to the park. I like to get my kids out inside the fresh air so that they get worn out, because when they're worn out kids, they obey better. I mean, physically worn out. I think a kid that's worn out in his mind by watching TV is one of the worst kids, because they have no physical energy out of them and their brain is blitzed and they just go bananas. And I think that's abuse on the mother. I think the mother's abused when the kids are watching TV. So I get the kids outside, and little Jonathan, he grabbed a hold of the stroller, so he had a system. Little Jonathan, and you saw it had to be trained in him. It didn't happen by accident. So I know my daughter-in-law took time when they were going on these busy streets, going up and down in the heat of Las Vegas, going door knocking, to make it fun for a little boy that hates the heat, that his little feet get tired and there's no stroller for him. She told him no negatives. So he didn't think it was negative. He thought, oh boy, because little Vanna went in a stroller, and you never see little Vanna. She smiles. She's always smiling and excited, or she's really grumpy. I mean, she's one or the other, but she's mostly just smiling and excited. And little Jonathan comes and grabs the side of the stroller, and he says, oh boy, Grandma, do we get to go door knocking? And I thought, that's an example of a mother who has trained her child. Can you imagine? Well, I don't want to say anything negative, but it's 120 degrees and that low. And Jonathan wasn't very tall at the time, so he was down there where it was like 150 degrees. Well, and his little short legs and his feet hurting, and he was loving it. He was loving going door knocking. So involve your children in the ministry. You do not have to be a preacher's wife to go door knocking. We offer all kinds of easy ways for you to go door knocking. You can just knock on the door, or you can even just put flyers in the door. My husband has created every way in the world for you to be part of that ministry and bring your babies if you're a young mom, or do it with your teenager. Never do it alone. And then anytime we have missionaries in the church, we would like to house missionaries. That is something you get to do. In June, we're going to have a missions conference, and I see several of you moms, you do this. You like to expose your children to missionaries. And you need to do that. And an easy way to do that is just have empty out one of your kids' rooms and have the missionaries stay there during the conference. And talk it up big to your kids. Say, oh, they live in Uganda, Africa, and it is so neat. These are real-life missionaries, and we get to host them in our house. And our kids love the mission field. They love missionaries. They love preachers. That's because we put it in front of them all the time, and that's something you can do. We would let the other night, Matthew, he says, oh, good, because he likes, to this day, and he's a preacher himself. Matthew said, oh, we get to sit with Dr. Paul Chappell and just pick his brain. They love to just sit with people that love the Lord, but that isn't by accident. It doesn't just all of a sudden, here I have this desire to pick someone's brain that loves the Lord. You know what I'm trying to say? It's something you have to develop in your child, and you can develop that in your child. You expose it to them. You really, really can. One thing we did is we didn't leave our children very often. When my mom would come into town, my husband and I would go someplace. We took a trip to Mexico, and it was such a thing that we took our kids all the time that when we left Faith and Hope this one time, they were sure we were just going down the street and turning around and coming back and get them. But we didn't, because we had Grandma there. My mom was there, and we didn't leave our kids to whatever they would be trained while we were gone. We took them along to the mission field. Faith, when she was 2 years old, had the people up in this remote jungle that had leprosy. They had all kinds of disease, and they couldn't believe her blonde hair. They were touching her blonde hair, and I was praying God's protection over her the whole time, you don't want to have body language like, don't touch my child. But we took them. They have a heart for missions, to where Hope has a heart for missions. She wishes she could save everybody with disease that's in these foreign countries. We toted our kids along, and you can go on mission trips. You don't have to be a preacher's wife to go on mission trips. You can go on mission trips. We take several of them, and you save your money up. And I know it isn't easy, but you find out where, and you can go on mission trips along. Provoke your children to think. What we would do is we had relatives that were not conducive for spiritual growth. So whenever they would come into the house and they would just come from a casino and said, yeah, I just won $5,000. What do you think of that, Matt? Hey, Josh, what do you think of that? We would tell them, well, Uncle so-and-so, how many thousands did it take to lose in the last year for you to get that 5,000? And we would talk that way so our kids knew that when they were being exposed to sin, we were right there with them. And we would tell them the other side of whenever they were being fascinated with this sin. I remember whenever Matthew was just firstborn, they had absolutely nothing family-friendly down on the Strip. Then we had a woman mayor by the time Charity was a baby that had family-friendly things, and there's still some of them there. And Circus didn't even, I didn't even like to take my kids in there, and Matthew would see the big clown. That was where we had the big post office, and we had to go there once a week with Matt. We would be dropping off our mail. And Matthew would say, clown, Mommy, clown. I said, that's a bad clown, Matthew. That's bad. What Satan does is Satan puts things on the outside to make it very happy for us. But you get in there, and those mommies that go in there, what they do is they take all their money that God gave them for groceries and for Christmas presents, and they put it in the slot machines, and they start gambling with that money that God gave them for their baby's food and for their baby's drink and for their baby's for Christmas. And we would tell them actual stories that whenever our first Christmas here, my husband grew up here, two teenagers called us on Christmas Eve. Christmas that year just happened to be on Sunday. They called us and they said, "What are you doing, Pastor? Can we come over?" And we said, "No, stay home with your family. It's Christmas Eve." "No, we want to come over." And this was the time there were no cell phones or anything, so we knew they were in their house. And they said, "There's nobody here." We said, "Look, I think it was like 6 o'clock on Christmas Eve, and it was already dark." And they said, "No, nobody's going to be home till tomorrow." And we had already been picking them up for church all the time. And we said, "Well, where's your mom?" Neither of them knew where their dad was, and they both had separate dads. They didn't even know their dads, never saw them. And they said, "Oh, Mom, she goes out drinking on Christmas Eve. That's just what she does. So we just spend the time alone." And he said, "Well, when do you get up and open Christmas presents?" "Oh, I don't know. It's whenever." And then we thought, man, they don't even get Christmas presents. These are teenage girls. They were like 13 and 14. Tina and Cheryl were their names. And we felt so bad. So what we did, they didn't have Walmarts back then. No malls were open. So we went to Kmart and got them each a dress, knowing they were going to be with us for Christmas morning. And we went and picked them up, and they slept on our floor. And this is before I had Matthew. And one of the girls, she had never worn a dress. She says, "I'm not wearing that dress." But I think she did just once in her life. So it was cute. But we would use examples like that to our children so they knew what would happen whenever you let sin in your life and you did not obey God. So sin was discussed. We'd show them the consequences of sin. Number 5, we would push consistency. What we did at home, we did at church. We were the real deal. Whatever we were, that's what we were. We didn't try to fake it. We didn't try to play games with people whenever people would come through and whatever. We just were just who we always were. We would teach them, though, you need to be discreet, because if we wear our pajamas at home, and we don't wear our pajamas at church. So there's certain things that are family secrets and certain things you can talk about at church. Number 6, you prove your convictions. We don't do that because we have heard many times, my husband and I have heard many times, "Your kids don't need to know why. You just spank them and tell them do it anyway because I'm boss." Well, that kind of made my husband and I try and rethink, okay, why? Why do that? And so what we would do is, even if they were too young to understand, we would try and explain to them. We'd say, well, whenever you're older, we'll explain it a little bit more, but this is why you don't do it. And if it came right down to it and they were feisty or upset, we'd say, well, you're just going to do it because you don't understand, and we do, and you're not going to do it because we're boss. Then number 7, it says, personally apologize. Now, ladies, realize you are not going to be perfect. I am not going to be perfect. We are going to blow it. You're going to get mad one day. Like that lady was in the grocery store that she saw. We don't realize how bad we look whenever we blow it, but our kids do, and they're the closest to us. So whenever you blow it, don't think, oh, they didn't notice how bad I was. Oh, your kids notice how bad you are. So apologize. You're not perfect. They really, really don't expect you to be perfect. And you go to them and you think, okay, Hopi, Mommy was really sorry. I did this with Joshua because Joshua had the energy and God knew he needed it because he was going to start a church. And he was all over the place. The child would not sit still. When he slept, he moved. And I was hurting when I would hold him. Charity's going through this because Trey's just like him. He moves when he sleeps, and it hurts. And I would always be saying, Joshua, I'm sorry, I lost my patience again. And I didn't probably talk like that. I'd say, Joshy, Mommy's sorry. I didn't mean to get mad. Joshy, I'm sorry. Will you forgive Mommy? And to Matthew. And Matthew was, everybody laughs now, he was the child that sat like this, and he observed the world. Faith was the perfect child. So, our family, when it gets together now, we laugh about the personalities our children are. But be consistent and apologize to them whenever you're wrong, because you are going to be wrong. Don't pander, don't coddle. Properly spank. Spanking is not hitting, it's not punching, it's not beating. It is the two little fat cheeks on the bottom. You swat those. That is where you spank. And it's not just one little tap either. But we will discuss that. I think anywhere else, I have never slapped my kids in the face. I think that is abuse. I had a woman in church that told me, my daughter acts just like yours. All I do is slap her across the face. And I know where her daughter is today. And I know where mine is. And I'm glad I didn't listen to her. Don't pander your kids. I do this with my grandbabies. I am a grandma. I am so awful. I know why grandmas aren't supposed to be the parent. Because I can see every reason why, oh, he didn't mean that. Oh, no, he's just tired. Oh, and I give every excuse in the world. When it was mine, I didn't put up with it. If it was right, it was right. And they did it. And as a grandma, I've got to keep that in mind. I don't spank. Now, oh, it was so cute the other day when Matt and Brianna had to go to Pensacola with some of your teenagers. I got the kids. It was so fun. And I don't spank my kids, and I don't make them, grandkids. And Ashlyn's sitting at the bar stool, and Bethany's sitting there. And Bethany looked at her food, and she didn't really want to eat what I gave her. And she'd kind of stare at it, and it's getting colder and grosser and gross. I'm not a good cook anyway, and I'm thinking, honey, you better eat it while it's hot, because it's going to be worse when it's cold. And I only give them a tiny bit of everything. The vegetable, it was broccoli that night, I think. I don't remember. Ashlyn would probably remember. But they sat there. Ashlyn just gulped it right down. She's like her dad. She'll do it. And Bethany was looking at it, and she was sweet, just looking at it. And, I wanted to cry with her. And I thought, I can't be a grandma. I've got to make this kid eat, or she's going to be sick by the time her mother gets home. And so she's looking at the food, and I'm thinking, I've got M&Ms. I've got ice cream. I've got Oreos. I'll give them all to you, Bethany. And but I didn't say any of that. And Bethany's sitting there. And I said, Bethany, you have to eat. You have to eat. Now, Grandma doesn't spank. And so I don't think she heard anything else after I said that. She sat back. It was so cute. She sat back and she sighed like, Ashlyn sits up and looks right at her and says, Grandma doesn't spank, but she punishes other ways. And Bethany looks at her and said, as if to say, what does she do? And Ashlyn said, she won't let you have ice cream or Oreos or M&Ms. So Bethany started eating. It was just so cute. But that's not how you do it with your own children. You can do that as a grandma. So put the good into your children so you can have that fun. Because don't bribe your children. They'll outdo you. Never bribe your children. Only do it as a grandma. Okay. Partner together with your spouse to be a united front. What that means is you need to agree together what is a spanking offense. Not everything is a spanking offense. And let me clarify again. When you spank, you do it on their little bottom, nowhere else. And it isn't just one little tap. You don't use a 2x4. You don't use you don't beat, you don't hit, you don't slap. You swat the little bottom to sting. You don't make a bruise. You don't make a thud. You don't jolt them. You don't shake them, because you can hurt them physically. You hear that sting? That sting? That hurts my hand. Glue sticks weren't around when my kids were around, but somebody said, oh, use a glue stick on their little fat cheek back there. And so I try it to see what it feels like. Whenever I'd swat my kids, I didn't have a glue stick, but I'd try to see what it felt like. I want the sting. So practice on yourself. See what that sting is. And I'm serious. You do not want to beat your kids. I am so against abuse. I am so against abuse. And I think if you don't spank your kids, you're abusing them. You're abusing yourself too. Oh, the kids that aren't spanked, they abuse their mother. Anyway, she deserves it if she don't spank her kid. Anyway, next. Push instant obedience. There was a little, we have some friends, Lee Louder and Wendy Louder. They have a little 2-year-old, I think. I hope I don't get this story wrong. On the age of the child, it was crawling age, so it might have been under 2. They had just moved into a house that wasn't totally finished, and it was near Washington, D.C., and they had an upstairs that had a balcony, and the balcony wasn't finished yet, when it's under construction. I don't know how they got to move in without the balcony not finished in Washington, D.C. area, but they did. And she had to run downstairs to answer the phone or something, and she had just cracked French doors. She had it cracked, and the balcony wasn't there. And so she knew her baby didn't move very fast. She was just going to run right down, grab the phone. Well, she was down there longer than she expected. The neighbor come out, and there was this baby leaning out, pushing the doors open 2 stories high. The baby would have died. This child was so trained by Wendy, and Daddy too, but Daddies aren't home. So it's the mother that did the training. The neighbor ran outside and said, "No, sit, no, sit." And this child sat back and started crying because somebody had yelled at it. If that child had not known instant obedience, that baby would probably be dead. And so there's Wendy looking outside thinking, why is that woman yelling? And then she realized what happened. Matthew, whenever he was about 10, 11, I'm not sure how old he was, I had come home from the ladies' boutique, and we had stopped and got a movie to watch. And what we like to do when our kids were little, we really only needed a 1-bedroom house because they liked to all crawl on our big bed and sleep around the floor in sleeping bags. And we had party night with popcorn and movie, and Dad would fall asleep and I'd fall asleep and they'd finish watching the movie. So we had this Christmas movie going, ready to go, and we realized there was no movie. And we're all sitting with the popcorn, and Dad says, "Oh, Matthew, the movie's down in the trunk. Go get it." So Matthew jumps up. And Matthew did. My kids instantly obeyed, and if they didn't, they did get spanked. I believe in instant obedience. And so he ran down. He didn't turn and say, "Oh, why can't Charity do this?" And Matthew went running down the steps, went and got the movie, and he came right back up the steps, locked the door, came back up the steps. We were just sticking the movie in, and we heard this knock at the door, urgent knock, and we went running down the steps. And the neighbor was Nancy, was saying, "What are you going to do about it?" And we thought, "Do about what? What are you talking about, Nancy?" "This drunk just ran into your car, smashed your car so hard that it moved the car 4 feet into your lawn." That was the exact spot Matthew was standing less than 3 minutes before. He would have been dead, if not dead, crippled, for the rest of his life, never repaired, because it actually moved our car into the garage. If Matthew would have taken time to just be a little bit slow, a little bit grumpy, or say, "Why can't Charity do it?" Or "Why can't," what kid doesn't do that? "Why can't Faith do it?" But I decided my kids were not going to do that. And I determined they were going to instantly obey. And when that happened in our life, I thought, thank you, God, that you put that urgency in me to make my kids instantly obey. And was it fun making my kids instantly obey? But no, it wasn't. It was a chore on my part. But was it worth it? Yeah, it certainly is worth it. Then a couple last things. It says, pull your child away from other children that they don't do well with. We did this with all of our kids. And, church kids are church kids. Preachers' kids are preachers' kids. Deacons' kids. If I saw my child was not doing good with another child, I would pull my child away. And I did not blame the other child's behavior. I made my child responsible for their behavior. And I'd say, "Matthew, you're just not doing good with him. You're going to sit with me in church." He's a teenager at 16 years old. "Yeah." And Dad would be behind it. And Dad would say, "No. I don't like how your attitude is right now. You're going to sit with your mother in church." And I'd usually sit near the back. And until we can see that you can get along with that other person without him and you together doing things you shouldn't be doing or having the attitude you have. We did it with Joshua. We did it with Charity and Faith and Hope. I believe that your kids should not just obey you. I believe your kids need to have a right heart attitude. Do I have a right heart attitude towards God all the time? No, but I know he's going to make me eventually get the right heart attitude. But I wanted my kids to know that, oh, we didn't do this bad thing because Jimmy made us do it, Daddy. No, you did those bad things because Matthew, Joshua, Charity, Faith, and Hope, you chose to go along with it, or you chose to stand beside them as they did the wrong. And I made them accountable, and I pulled them away from that child. Even in the teenage years, Dad didn't put up with it. He pulled them away from a child that gave them a bad attitude. Not just doing wrong, because if you can check the attitude, you're going to be checking the behavior, and that's what you want to do before they actually are doing the thing that is wrong. You check what's wrong in their attitude. But you have to spend time with your kids to know if they have a bad attitude. So make sure you're with your kids spending time. Number 12, practice positive replacement. Replace bad things with good things. By that I mean, my husband grew up with rock music and he likes it. I don't have any spiritual conviction about it because I'm just not real smart. I don't know what is good music or bad music. I just know I hate it. And my husband, he knows what is good music and bad music because he grew up with rock music and he loved it. And he knows these lyrics are not bad. This is not a good beat. We're not having this in the home. So if their kids got influenced by a friend and you would hear, what are you listening to? Turn that commercial off. They're enjoying the commercial too much, We would replace it by music we could get like from West Coast Baptist College. We have praise songs that we got whenever Matthew was a baby, and we plugged those in. And we just have them playing all the time. Music playing all the time was a big thing to my husband. I lived out in the woods, so I didn't grow up with music. We hardly had any electronics at all. The birds sang, So I'm serious, whenever we got married, I didn't feel the need to be plugging in music all the time. My husband did. All the time, he was plugging in music. And I think, everything's so noisy. Well, it's because the cities are noisy. And, so my kids grew up with music all the time playing. But don't just take away bad things from your kids. Don't take away bad music. Give them good music. Give them fun music. They don't have to have, and I think Holy, Holy, Holy is a good song, but I don't see any 5-year-old enjoying it or any teenager. So give them fun, peppy, praise type music. Then last, pursue your child's heart. We want them to know that we love them more than we love anybody else in the whole world. And so in order to do that, you have to spend time with them. You have to have fun with them. And my husband tells about this one boy who said, "Would you play with me?" And the pastor said, "Well, yeah, I'm busy right now, but there's your daddy. Go play." "Oh, but my daddy can't play with me. He's too busy playing with other people's kids." Don't let it be said that the youth director plays with your children more than you do. Don't let it be said that the babysitter has more fun with your child than you do. I knew this missionary one time that gave a testimony when we were in college that said she knew this family on the mission field that did not protect their children on the mission field. This story has stayed with me forever. They had a woman, they must have been Muslim or something, and she was the babysitter. The kid grew up, missionary's kid grew up Muslim or Hindu or something. I can't remember the exact story, because the nanny that was in the house was that belief. And evidently, she had more fun with that little boy than mommy did, because the little boy would rather be happy pleasing that woman than mommy or daddy. So don't be guilty of that. Make sure that your children have you beside them. Make sure and the only way to do that is spend time with them. And can it be a pain? There were times whenever my kids were little and I'd see women, you get the phone calls, "There's a sale over at Mervyn's, there's a sale here." I had no money. And besides that, I couldn't just load up all 5 kids and go. We had to do homeschool. Does it feel at times like, "Oh, I'm suffering. This too shall end." Your kids will be out of the house. But if you think it's suffering to not go to Mervyn's and spend, if you think it's suffering to stay with your children while other moms dump their kids and go, let me tell you right now, I am not suffering. at all with my relationship with my kids. Every minute was worth it. I do not regret any time I spent with my kids or my grandkids. Thank you.
Wow, that was amazing. I really am so thankful that you found that and that we were able to present it to the ladies that tune in.
Yeah, I love hearing Mom talk about practicality in family ministry. I mean, it's exactly what the Bible teaches older women to teach the younger women. And she just shares it so clearly. If this has been a help to you, I highly suggest that you share it with another woman, share it with another mom, share it with your daughters, because this will be something that they can use on. I'm telling you, when I listened to it, I couldn't believe it was from 2009. The practical biblical truths are things that are timeless, that are shared, and they just really are helpful. I loved hearing her talk about what she did for prayer for our family and just the practical application of teaching your children the Bible and how to follow God's word. So we really enjoyed listening to that today. We look forward to having you listen in to next week's episode, which is a surprise. So remember, this is Teis Talks.
And it's more than a conversation.